But all right, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the December 2023 meeting of the St. Mary's County Library Board of Trustees. My name is Michael Dunn. I'm the president. It's a pleasure to see everybody again. We do have a quorum with 5 of the 7 members in attendance right now. And so why don't we go around the horn and do introductions? We can start with John and then go around, and Sharon, if you can wrap us up.
John Walters.
Trust Setlack, treasurer.
Judith Gwynn.
Sharon Fitzsimmons.
Thanks, everybody. We do have a quorum, so we can proceed. The first item on our list is the approval of the November 2023 minutes.
I do have a question about them. In Roman numeral 2, subparagraph A, I don't understand. We've got kind of a double thing there. Motion to accept is blank, and then there was a motion to accept, and we went forward from there. So do we have a line we can strike out?
That's under the corrections. You guys noticed that there was a line, Roman numeral 6 of the previous minutes. There was a motion to accept that was blank. So that is what needed to be corrected in the previous minutes.
Got it.
I recall because I brought it up. I think there was a motion to accept, but nobody's name was there.
You didn't make a motion to accept.
Okay.
That was a correction in the minutes.
Oh,
From the
Okay.
previous month's minutes.
Yes.
I got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Think that was unclear. Thank you for that clarification.
That's probably John.
I think so. All right. Welcome, John Johnston, our VP. Glad we're here. We're just going through the minutes right now. Any other comments or questions? I think we can entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to accept as presented.
Second.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Judith. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained? The motion is adopted. Next, we move on to the approval of the monthly expenses ledger, the EALs. Any questions or comments about this?
There was an amount that I was looking at. I can turn to it. On the second page, miscellaneous supplies, 10,500. Fifth one down.
To PNC Bank.
Yes.
Credit card payment.
Okay.
It's all 8 employees who have credit cards, 1 payment.
Is that the right label then? Supplies?
I label each of the expenses separately, but when you group it and pay it as one thing, it's just listed as miscellaneous supplies as the payment. But I have individual expenses on my QuickBooks.
And I have a question on page 1. a squeak over halfway down, books and processing fees for 16.9. I understand the books. What's wrapped up in the word processing fees?
When the books come from the vendor, they have to have labels put on them, so they're pretty close to being prepared. So that's called processing. So it's the preparation to put them on the shelves.
That takes place in-house, correct?
No, it does not. The vendor does quite a bit of that, and then Smyrla does some as well.
Ah, okay. This is, I'm on page 3 out of 4, down near the bottom, about 2 or up. S&B company for our audit for 10,129. They've given us the audit. We've sent it forward with approval. Mr. Chairman, I think we need a little subcommittee to take a look at what was presented in that audit. There were some discrepancies and some errors. And I think, I personally would not like to see them go down that same path again if we're going to keep using them.
Can we table that until we get to new business at the end?
Yep.
Thank you. I think at this point, we can entertain a motion to approve these EALs as written.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you, John and John. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the EALs as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Okay, the motion is adopted. Next on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Such sweet sorrow, we have to wait another month until January so we can move on to the Smyrla report. John.
Yes, did not meet in November, and our December meeting is normally scheduled for the second Tuesday. So this month we are ahead of them. So we have any information from the December meeting at our January meeting.
Perfect. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Okay, let me turn it over to Michael for celebrations.
An addendum to the Smyrla report, which John would not have known about. As part of our strategic planning process, our vendor wants access to the integrated library system Polaris, and we're negotiating with Smyrla to get that access, and it should be rolling forward. So looking forward to seeing some of the reports, which will do quite a bit with, and it's all anonymized. We won't have anybody's name on it, but demographics, the patterns of checkout, collection analysis. So that will all be part of the strategic planning process. And thank you to Smyrla for facilitating that access.
Michael, before you go on, is that negotiation like permission or cost-wise?
It's by negotiation. Smyrla has concerns about anybody accessing the database, and they want to make sure of the security of the system. And our vendor, Library IQ, has worked with many libraries before and could assure them that this data is secure.
So it's a permission negotiation, not a
It
financial.
has nothing to do with cost. No.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I, thank you.
Celebrations, I'd first like to read from Sue Clifton, an acknowledgement and thanks for your recognition of her retirement last month. Dear Board of Library Trustees, thank you for the recognition of 19 years of service. Working at Leonardtown was my pleasure. I was fortunate to have a good place to finish out my working years. Sincerely, Sue Clifton. So wanted to make sure that you got that. We do have quite a few hip hip hoorays today. They are, however, all for the same thing. So Amy, who is here, Amy, thank you. Belinda, who is here, thank you. Brianna Thorne, Megan Friend, Sue Faber, and Jeffrey Stainbrook, all were the committee to organize the staff or the staff day, which was last week, and Michael and John Johnson, you both attended. Thank you for coming out to that. Thank you for your contributions to a successful staff event day. You helped foster greater knowledge with the Maryland Library Association and the Maryland Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, allowed staff to meet people they may not have met before, enhanced morale and teamwork, and created a lot of fun. Well done. We thank you for your outstanding service. I might as well just do a quick overview of Staff Day. Thank you for allowing us to have that. We did hear from the president of the Maryland Library Association, who talked about what the Maryland Library Association does and the benefits of belonging. And in fact, we've arranged for all of our staff to be members of the Maryland Library Association. They are giving what amounts to a very inexpensive bulk rate, which is not much more expensive than I pay for my individual memberships. So did hear from the Maryland Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, and looked at all the devices that they have for allowing people to cannot easily read because of perhaps vision impairments or being, for example, dyslexic. All the different technology they have to expand access and the programs that they offer. They are allowed under the Marrakesh Treaty to create their own versions of audiobooks, for example. So that was very informative. And then we simply had quite a bit of staff morale building activities and team enhancement. So it was a really fun day, and thank you to all of you for arranging for that.
I was there for the whole time, and I was impressed with what I saw. And what easy when staff are working in different locations, how easy it is to become siloed. So give them a chance to meet folks they wouldn't have normally have met. And I liked the activities that were offered. It's like a sort of a chance to relax a little bit as part of the holiday season. And I was impressed with the staffers that I met at the event too.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
I agreed. Kudos to the committee. You all did an amazing job. I thought the professional development opportunities you created were excellent, but there was that element of team building and morale boosting, and all the little details were so nice. Everything on the tables, the program of the event itself, it was just really, really well done. So kudos to you all.
All right. And then we had two people who have graduated from the Library Associate Training Institute, that statewide training offered, especially to library assistants and library associates who do not have the Master of Library Science. And it's a very intensive program in which they learn the history of libraries, some of our basic values, explore issues related to library trends. And so to Rosa Nakamoto and Jacob Parsons, congratulations for finishing that training.
Congratulations.
Moving into informational, the FY24 budget review you have in your packet. Looking at it with 42% of the year passed by, rather than review individual line items, I'll simply ask if you've got questions, because things mostly look to be in order in terms of the amount of money spent. There's a couple of lines where, we've expended nearly all of the funding, but in many cases, those might be contracts that are front loaded and happen earlier in the year. So I don't, as I look at it, have any particular concerns about any amounts. You'll see some of them are low because we don't yet, for example, Leonardtown Gas have that invoice paid and on record as of the end of November. So if you have any questions about any of the budget lines, happy to talk about those.
Michael, this is Sharon. I noticed that the admin and COVID hours has maxed out. Do you guys have a plan, or was that something that was just through the end of this year, and next year people will be addressing the COVID needs differently?
Well, we were hoping we were coming out of the COVID pandemic, but in fact, there was a spike once school started, and then again more recently, of staff who did test positive for COVID. So we simply didn't budget as much as we had hoped we wouldn't have to. We'll do a budget reconciliation for that line, and hope that as the year progresses that we will not see another spike, but who can tell?
My apologies. Where are we in the,
That's page 1 at the bottom of the first grid, admin and COVID hours. We had budgeted for $5,000 for that, and so far we've already spent $137. But you know, the amount is very little in terms of, you know, the overall budget $5,000, and it will probably end up having to do a reconciliation on that one before the year's end.
okay,
I had a question about page 3, the third line down, the digital collection contracts. Justin, that we're at 123% of the budget at this point.
Yes, so the reason for that is because we added a contract that we did not know about before the fiscal year started, and it was the one for an add-on to the website that allows you to translate the website for non-hearing people. But Sarah, who does both the digital contracts and the virtual services, she works with both those budgets, and we're going to be under on one of them, and we're going to move that money to the other one at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll have you do a budget reconciliation. We should at some point demo for you that web add-on, which allows the website to appear in different languages and does have some accessibility features. So maybe next month we'll write down to do that. It's really a very interesting feature that our website now offers.
Is that feature easy to find for folks who may need it?
Yes, I think it's easy to find, but I know where it is, so I'd have to turn that question over to somebody who may be.
It's right at the top, so along the top of the website. I can actually pull it up if you want. It's under accessibility tools. So,
I'm sorry, it's under accessibility. So
yeah, that's what it's called, accessibility tools. So let me screen share really quick. You were there. Oh, it's showing. But is it showing on the, I don't know, just it doesn't on Zoom. I just want people on Zoom to see it too. So it's right here, accessibility toolbar.
Okay,
So
so
if
under
you
the
click
word
on it-
accessibility at the very top.
Yeah, and then it has this whole bar of things that you can do.
Wow.
So there's languages, there's also changing the text, changing the color, making it so that people with different vision impairments or language needs can all have an accessible website for them. And it changes the entire website. So as you go through the website, it will have made it, like it has different fonts. For example, Michael used the example of dyslexic. So it can change the fonts, it can change the language, it can do all of that. So it's a really impressive tool. It's worth clicking through and seeing it.
Thank you.
And of course, our website still meets accessibility guidelines, independent of those tools.
Yes, Sarah is very, very careful with that, and she tries to keep up. I mean, obviously, as much as possible, things change, but she does very carefully watch what the requirements are, because public libraries are required to take this into account. So our website actually is very accessible, but this was just another tool beyond even requirements.
can I ask you to go back and repeat the beginning of your explanation of that line?
Which part? Like the accessibility?
We're in the same
toolbar?
one, digital collection contracts and the
You want
overage.
me to?
Whoever, yeah.
About the budget part?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sarah manages both the digital collection and contracts and the virtual services contracts. So there's a couple things going on. One, Smyrla got a grant this year for to help with Wi-Fi hotspots. So they had agreed to pay for some of our hotspot contracts this fiscal year that we had already built into the fiscal year budget. So because they're paying for something that we had expected to pay for in virtual services, we are going to have extra money. So we're going to move that virtual services money into the digital contracts to pay for the Recite Me contract.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions about the budget?
Thank you, Michael. I think we're good on that.
All right. Give you a quick update on the mobile library on December 20th. We are going to go over to Kent Island where the mobile library is being assembled at the company Tech Ops. And we're going to see a visit from a man named Michael Svendowski. He is the contractor we hired to guide us through the process to help with the MOU, to get the MOU out nationally. And he has extensive experience and a long checklist that he's going to go through with Tech Ops, looking at the vehicle specs to make sure it's up to spec, and also to make sure that it's going to be, passing all tests to make it road safe. So then on December 22nd, we are going back and taking delivery of the vehicle, and there'll be some drivers training for the people who operate the vehicle, and they'll be bringing it down on December 22nd. So we are expecting delivery then. On January 9th, we are scheduled to have the ribbon cutting that will be at the Lexington Park Library. We assume right after I'm still Leonardtown Library, I'm sorry. Right after the commissioner meeting, typically is when they'll do that. They'll come over after the meeting. So we are also planning in February to take the vehicle on the road to all 3 libraries, because that's a Tuesday, that ribbon cutting. A lot of people might be at work and not have a chance to see it. So the mobile library will visit all 3 locations on a weekend and give the public an opportunity to see it and get on board. So you saw, with any luck, out front the small library van with its new wrap on. It was delivered yesterday. So you get some sense of just how colorful this vehicle is going to be. We're very happy with that wrap. And I think it makes the vehicle look very distinctive, and there'll be no trouble recognizing it going down the road. It's going to stand out.
Saw it sitting outside the vendor's office the other day.
Yeah.
Michael, do the commissioners, this meeting, is that a morning or an afternoon?
It's a morning meeting.
Morning.
It's their typical 9 o'clock to whenever they get out meeting. So we will be working with the county next week to send out all the invites, and there's an extensive invite list, including elected officials, school officials, former trustees, obviously current trustees, just people who have been involved with the project. So you'll be getting an invite to that event.
Can we just pause to celebrate the fact that this vehicle is coming to us on the 22nd? That's incredible. That is such great news.
I'd hold off given the record.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Well, color me cautiously optimistic. I think this is very exciting.
I will get
Fair
in front
point.
of it with a snow shovel. I mean,
Yeah.
it is going to get delivered on the 22nd.
Michael, I drove by Leonardtown. There was some heavy equipment. Is that for the parking space for the mobile library?
Yeah, okay. So that was to install the plug in which the vehicle will be plugged into the electrical system, so that we don't have to run the engine to have it operational out in the parking lot. Unfortunately, the electrical contract hit a main power line, knocking out the power to some of the lights outside. We were afraid it had knocked out the power to the entire parking lot, and we were thinking about having to close. But the county then said, well, it's not as bad as that. So they're going to be working to reinstall or get those lights working and make sure that the power line is working. The parking pad, unfortunately, is going to be difficult to get finished given the weather, but we're hoping that it will be done soon. Yeah, that was an unpleasant surprise, unfortunately.
We'll be driving the vehicle here. Will that be one our staff or will
It'll
it
be our staff,
Okay.
yes. we're taking delivery of it. So I will be writing up there. So I don't know if Sandy and Rosa are going to want to drive it down themselves or what. So our first big challenge is going to be coming across that Chesapeake Bay Bridge into Annapolis.
Yeah.
No wind.
Fortunately, we'll be going against traffic, so it shouldn't be particularly bad. And it will be an interesting first driving experience for our staff. So very happy that that's happening. We have done the staff day update already, but thank you, John and Michael, for your comments about that. And thank you to the entire trustees for letting us have a day for staff. Personnel manual, met with a couple of you and did some extensive revisions. And the draft you have, I see, does not have at least one change that I made. Not to worry, we have another session scheduled to review that. And so I will at that time make sure that any change that was not made in this draft for you, for those people who are going to be coming to the editing session, will be made, and it will be, you're looking at exactly what so far it is. Now, at that time, there may be further comments made, and I'll prepare yet another draft for you to see. So for January, the whole board will have a thoroughly reviewed draft. And so I don't want to have you review changes now when it's not really final yet and go through page by page. But I did want to take a look at some suggestions from all of you about either questions or possible suggested changes, and talk to you about some reasons why we think that the manual should stay as is. I hope that you don't feel like you need to debate that now. Let's save that for when you're going to actually approve the manual, but that might answer some questions so that they don't keep coming up as we are continuing the editing process. After the next draft, I'll send something out to the whole board well ahead of time so that you can review it one more time. And I'm hoping in January, we can all agree that it's done. It's been a long process, but it is a long and very detailed document. So thank you for your close eyes on it.
Michael, can I interject two
Sure.
points before you dive into the
Yeah.
specifics? One, that I do truly hope that we can put this to bed in January. Hopefully we'll be at that point. And second, just to underscore, the editing sessions, Michael, that you described are not full board meetings, and those meetings do not involve a quorum of board members. Just to confirm and be crystal clear for ourselves and for our audience. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
So if you look on page 10, you'll see already that one change that was suggested, which is the first time we mention St. Mary's County Library, we put in parentheses after that library or the library, and that change be kept throughout. So you'll see that the library, the board, code, for Code of Maryland laws related to libraries are going to be used as that sort of identifier. But the question was nominate for appointment. So we're on about the middle of that page, third bullet point. Nominate for appointment all employees in the system. And the question was, what does that mean? That's actually what Maryland library law says, is that we will, the director nominates for appointment all employees. And that's just the language that's used in Maryland code, but that's the same as basically hiring them. And it's all levels of employment other than the director who you, the trustees, appoint.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Who is on this editing committee?
Well, John and Judith have been making edits and asked.
Like there was a committee that was.
There's not. Everybody was asked to submit comments. We just had a lot of comments, so we felt it was easier to.
So I
talk them
met
through.
separately just to hear those rather than have them do lengthy emails and me respond to lengthy emails.
And I actually piggybacked in on her session because mine were, I thought we could kill two birds with one stone, but mine were more grammatical and hers were much more cerebral.
Where we put a comma.
Yes.
Yeah, so all Oxford commas are now in place. Um, all right, so on page 10, section 1.8, it was requested that following state library agency, we insert under the Maryland Department of Education. That change we should not make because the state library agency is no longer under the Maryland Department of Education and has not been for a couple of years.
Where does it report?
It's its own independent entity now. So I'm sorry, I would have to ask Irene, but I believe, yes, it is. I think she's reporting directly to the state herself and not the Department of Education anymore. So under Maryland code, we're still in libraries considered to be under education, but the state library is now independent of the Department of Education. On page 17 of this draft, section 2.10, under paragraph 2 of the lactation and breastfeeding policy, it says for up to 1 year after a child's birth. And the question is, why is there a time limit? And the answer is that's federal law. It is considered a right under federal law for the first year. And after that, it's not. Now, that doesn't mean that we as a library would say, your year is up, we're not going to accommodate you. We would just work with that person. They might have to take their own break time to do that. But it says 1 year because that's what the law says.
I still have a problem with that. Either way, we'd be allowing it for a year, right?
Yeah, for up to 1 full year, it's guaranteed as a right under the federal law. After that, after 1 year, we would work with the employee.
I think
So
I'd like to
we're not
see
limited to a year. We just have to give it at least a year.
Correct.
The law says for up to 1 year. That's the official, what the law says. So
Yeah.
that's what's allowed under federal law. Could we do more? Yes, but we'd have to work with the employee.
I'm a little disturbed by that portion of the explanation not being in the document. That we would continue to work with the employee. Well,
No,
that's my
I think
question.
John is saying that the fact that we would continue working with the employee after year 1 is not included in the document. So this paragraph could be read as saying, all right, you got 1 year and after that it's done.
We always communicate with our employees in these situations. This states the law. And the personnel manual needs to state the law so that we have that option of following the law.
I mean, the law guarantees at least a year. It doesn't limit us to a year.
No, it doesn't say you as
So,
individual
you're right, and
employees
we-
can't, but this is what the official government
And we
policy
don't want to
would be.
rely on
Yeah.
personality, which is, and I don't mean that in a way that the good graces of people that are great managers now, that may not always be the case. And so you become relying on personality and goodwill instead of a regulation or a policy. Who knows in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, who's running the library may not have your same feelings of grace and accommodation.
But
So
this is federal law. This is what.
no, the
has
law
to-
says at least a year.
now-
The library's not limited to the year.
Right,
What we're
and this-
saying is, if you just, like Michael says, just struck it and just say, we're going to accommodate breastfeeding employees, then you're not limited to the year.
No, I
Somebody
wanted
don't
to
have
say
to
what the
do what the
law
federal law
says. This is what the federal law says. I don't want it to
Yeah.
change that. I think that that's important to have in there because this is what the law says. Now, other than that, we can work with employees, but let's assume somebody comes along who's not willing to work with employees. They'd have the law in place as written.
Wait a minute.
As an HR representative, you do not want to put in more things into the manual or that then require you to require more subjective ideas. You need to put this law in and it's the culture of the library to work with the employee. It's not the policy of the library to work with the employee.
Well, we're
But that-
working on a policy manual. How about this? Under federal law, what's the federal law inserted into that first part? it's up to 1 year, comma, but if needed, the library will work
May-
beyond that.
M-
Yes, you
May,
can.
may I also please ask that,
I
He
just
just
said that,
He just did.
But then you can't say, well, we'll work with the employee.
beyond the federal law.
Why not?
no, we don't, we don't
No.
want to do that. Um, yeah, we just want to, here's the law.
Stop micromanaging this person.
Um, may I also ask that we not at this point debate these things? I just want to let you know, these are the answers back. So if you want to change that, you're still going to have the opportunity to do that. I'm just letting you know that's why we want to keep it the way it is. And again, this is not going to be final. This is just, I'm hoping, going to answer some questions so that they don't keep coming up. Or if you want them to keep coming up, you know the reason why that is the way we have it in the manual. On page 22, there was a question about the safe and secure manual. That is a procedural manual. We update that. It does not require board approval. We will provide a link to it here, but I do not want it to be a part of this manual and have to constantly change when something might change related to, you know, who at a branch is responsible for ensuring a report to the county, which we do have to do, of our compliance with safety procedures. On page 28, there was a question about why we have full-time listed as 35 hours and why that's different than the 40 hours. And we should either move library hours up to 40, which would suit me just fine, make sure I get that 5 extra hours of pay, because our current full-time is 35 hours. And the federal rule for doing overtime is 40 hours. And that's the reason for the 5-hour difference. You don't have to, under federal law, start paying overtime until 40 hours. Now, this is kind of a moot point because our non-exempt employees are not allowed to work more than 35 hours in a week. We simply don't allow it. Our exempt employees may, but they would then get compensatory time, which is covered separately. And the question is also about 28 hours, why we don't really let people work more than that. And the answer is, if you regularly work, even on a kind of strange schedule, like every second month you work as a 28-hour employee more than 28 hours, let's say more than 30, we're required to give that person benefits if they regularly work more than 30 hours a week. So we simply don't allow people on a regular basis to go over the 28.
And when you say regular, I think you explained it in our meeting, that could happen irregularly.
It could happen irregularly, yes. So one work period, a 28-hour employee might say, can I do a little extra and not do it next week? And typically we say yes to that kind of a request, but it really cannot happen on a regular basis.
What else you got?
On page 29. No, I'm sorry, page 30. We're over to, this is section 3.10, paragraph 1, line 4. And this must be the world's most boring television for our audience. It says compensatory time is granted to full-time exempt staff who work pre-approved time greater than 1/2 hour with a standard work day. must be used within 2 pay periods, may not be banked for future use. And the comment is, the Maryland Department of Budget and Management specifies that state employees have 1 year to earn compensatory time. We are not state employees and are not bound by that. And we don't have, frankly, the capacity to create a database of people banking compensatory time. We ask that they use it up front. It also suits the library schedule better to know when that time's going to be used. And incidentally, if you are going into July and an employee, let's say they got compensatory time in January, that counts as a financial liability. It's considered to be something owed in the audit. So we just as soon not get into that. And since we're not state employees, I don't think we have to.
I have a question about that. The employees are in the state retirement system.
Yes.
You have an email from some guy somewhere up the line that confirms that we are required as a state agency to advertise in Emma. Okay.
We're not required to do that.
The
I
law-
have done it, but we're not required to.
I'll check that email. There was another thing. State employee, Emma. And we report to somebody who is at the top of the state hierarchy. How are we not, even at our level, a state agency?
Well, that's a very good question. We were a county agency. As of 2015, we no longer are, but that didn't make us a state agency, and we're not paid by the state.
We participate in state benefit programs.
But we're
But
still not state employees.
We are not paid by the state, nor are we paid by the county.
By state.
But that makes us an employee of the state. This is about employees of the state.
Something not
Also, I would,
I think we're some kind of hybrid agency.
Yeah.
And I know at the federal level, they do have these things. They're very unique hybrid agencies that don't fit into usual federal
So
structure.
when the state gives its employees a raise, we don't get one. We're not state employees.
I
can
think-
I also say on the comp time, the reference to the state employees bank and that entire comp time law doesn't refer to the comp time that we're talking about. There's different types of comp. Those comp time is about hourly non-exempt employees. There is a law that the federal state governments don't have to pay overtime if they offer comp time to their employees. And that is why they have to provide a bank and all of that. We don't, that law actually states very specifically that libraries do not fall in this law. They cannot use it. Despite the fact that it didn't matter anyway, because we are not a federal nor state employee. So that law doesn't apply at all. The comp time that we use is for exempt employees only. Non-exempt employees get flex time.
Over to page 37 under mileage reimbursement. About 3 lines down, it says, if the library van is not available, mileage reimbursement is paid as funds allow. The question is, should it be that if funds do not allow, should employees be told ahead of time about that? And should they then sign a non-reimbursement agreement about before they start travel? And the answer to that is we do not wish to make the change. We don't require staff to go to trainings. That's a voluntary thing. And they understand ahead of time that we're certainly going to do our best to provide travel funds, but if the travel budget's exhausted, they may not get that, but it's a voluntary thing. And we give web-based training and local trainings for employees who don't wish to travel. And the library van is available for groups to travel to staff develop meetings and to conferences. So I don't know that it's necessary to have them ahead of time agree, well, I'm not going to get paid for this. on page, we don't have too many, will actually we do. Page 44. This is under annual leave accrual. Bullet point 4 on that first point, upon separation, a good standing from the library employee will not be reimbursed for unused leave, which exceeds the maximum amount they can carry forward. And it said, is there a maximum accrual? It should be specified. It is specified down below there what the maximum accrual is for the different levels.
Okay.
So the escape clause is which exceeds.
Yeah, so somebody might have accrued, I, for example, give up about 100 hours a year because I simply don't take time. And if I were to retire, I'd have a certain level and it's spelled out here, which I would get compensated for. And I can't come back and say, well, what about my extra 100 hours?
Okay, so it's the with exceeds.
Yeah, yeah. Over on page 62, this was a question, not a comment. It's about the use of credit cards. And the question is, do employees use credit cards while on travel? How are expenses paid? And certain employees do have a library credit card. That tends to be a branch manager, a coordinator level, or director or deputy director. And so, for example, when I go to a conference that is going to be paid out of the staff development fund, I can register for that conference using my credit card. I can, at the hotel, use that credit card to pay for the stay. And every month we have to have reconciliation of those cards. So I provide the receipts for when I travel, and they have to match all the expenses. And those are paid on a monthly basis. And you just had a question about, well, what was that? And Belinda explained, well, that was all the credit cards for this month. So they are paid on a monthly basis. There is a rigorous process for that. And we do not pay per diem. So if, for example, I go to a conference, it is just the conference fee and the hotel fee. And so I don't have a daily expense. That's on me as an
Plus
employee.
travel.
Yeah, so if I took a plane, for example, or if I drove my car and there's funds available, but yeah, that would also be covered. So that's how to answer that question. On page 72 and 73, having to do with separations and terminations. The same question came up in both sections. On page 72, the second paragraph of section 12.3, it says employees who not provide 2 weeks calendar notice will forfeit their leave. On page 74, it says when an employee quits without notice, they forfeit all accrued PTO or annual leave under 12.6. And the question is, A, is that legal? And B, is it fair? And the answer to the question about its legality is absolutely. And I sent you via email the section of Maryland's labor laws that allow that. As long as it's stated in the manual, it's legal. Now, is it fair? We need to look out for the employer here as well. I will say that this has not really happened in my term here. We haven't terminated anybody who had leave. But if somebody wants to leave and not give 2 weeks notice, this is an incentive to make sure they're giving that 2 weeks notice. And if somebody wants to, we're thinking about terminating somebody, what we do is go to them and say, okay, here's termination. Here's what's going to happen. That person might decide instead that they wish to resign. And if they did that, they would keep their leave. And we wouldn't be looking then at a possible, suit over unfair termination if they resign.
I am trying really hard to make sure that my perspective is staying high level and that we're not micromanaging things. And so my question for the HR experts in the room who have drafted this, when we think about somebody who quits without notice, God forbid someone goes through a traumatic experience and they quit immediately. Does this language give you the leeway to work with that person to deal with things in a fair way?
Yes.
Yes,
If
it does.
it's a good employee and that we don't really want to lose, but we also understand that they are in a personal crisis, most likely we would discuss with this employee possibilities. If they have leave, we would possibly, and I'm not guaranteeing this in the future, but we would maybe talk to them about, give us your 2 weeks notice, take the leave. There's a lot of options that we can work with an employee on, but we aren't going to write that into a manual because it's a case-by-case circumstance. As an employer, you need this right. This is standard policy across most employers, and you need this right to protect yourself and the employees, because you don't want somebody to just not show up the next day and send you an email and then have to pay them for 140 hours of vacation time.
Yeah, so to use your example, Michael, somebody's having a personal crisis. I can't come to work. Well, you've got leave. Why don't you submit a resignation 2 weeks from today when you're whatever leave you have? But we have to be careful to make sure we're being consistent, because if we treat one person one way and another person another way, we do open the library up for a lawsuit. So this is official language that does protect the organization, and the manual needs to do that as well. But we do have different ways where we could quite legally work with somebody, and we would try to do that in every case.
Thank you.
And we ought to state that in this document. We're not going to get to the bottom of this now, but I'm not at all happy with an employee coming in and basically there's an unstated lien on their time.
No, this is a high level policy document. We don't want the nuts and bolts of procedures and what happens in every given scenario should not be included in this. My question is more for the HR experts who have carefully drafted this language to be in compliance with the law. Does it still give us room to do the right thing and live out the library's values in a way that's not dependent on the good graces of any individual, but the language is broad enough and strong enough to encompass all that?
Well, it doesn't say that. We can talk about it later.
It can.
Question on you mentioned termination and somebody may opt to resign instead. But when you terminate somebody, isn't it immediate? You don't let them stay here for 2 more weeks, do you?
If somebody were to be terminated, that would be the case. So the idea here would be to go to somebody and say, all right, we think we've reached the end of the line here. Yeah. I would probably in every case say to that person, you have an option to resign or you will be terminated.
Okay, so they may resign, give you 2 weeks notice so they can get their leave.
But it would be right then and there. And there's a whole process in the Maryland state law for how that would happen.
So,
termination happens.
Okay, but if you terminate somebody, it's when you give them that letter, it's usually immediate.
It is,
day.
yeah.
Okay, so, but if you allow them the option of resigning, they're here for 2 more weeks?
Not necessarily.
Not legally have to have any employee work those last 2 weeks, even if they give you notice, even if they leave on good standing. You can choose to not have them work those 2 weeks after leave.
Okay.
That is the law.
That's what I was looking for, is that you don't want somebody here under not a good situation.
Right.
Yeah.
In your workspace.
And so mercifully, we haven't had to do that, at least in my tenure here, but there's a full process laid out in Maryland state law. I have to give them a written letter. You are terminated. They have the right to appeal to the board. And another question that came up later that I can take care of now. It says they have the right to be heard publicly. That's Maryland law. An employee who wants to appeal to you, their termination, can come in here in front of the whole public, be on camera and say, I'm appealing this. I want it to be public. Now, they could also choose to have a closed hearing on that.
Okay,
But
yeah,
it says
I
in
noticed
Maryland
that.
law, they have the right to be heard publicly.
So, but that language, I don't know what that is. We might look at that language. It says they will have a public hearing, but they will have either a public or a closed hearing. Is that?
The Maryland
that
state law
correct?
says they have the right to have a public hearing, but my interpretation of they could choose to have a private one with just a closed hearing if they wanted. But
So should the language
We
say,
quoted the law.
we were quoting the law, yeah.
right, but that's not our policy. Our policy is we're gonna give them a chance to be public or.
No, well, the state law is it's public. And I would probably in the event say to somebody, okay, do you want this public? If they do, they do.
But if they don't,
Well, I think that we could give them the option, but they have what the state law says is they have the right to a public hearing.
state law says then you have a right to a public hearing, but you may request a closed hearing.
It doesn't say that.
Com-
I mean, this is not law. No, this is a
I'm
policy
not
document.
changing the law, Tressa.
There's a
Alright,
lot of
guys,
things in here
let's
that
keep
are
it
not,
civil and friendly, okay?
but there's a lot of things in here that are not state law. This is a policy procedures manual.
Yes,
Yeah,
Not
but-
every single thing.
That
in here-
one is state law. though.
But when we reference a law,
Yeah.
we stick to the law so that we are not putting ourselves into a situation that is stepping past the law.
Well, then put a period after it and say, but
Yeah, I don't understand why.
We
can't.
don't expand on the law.
we're not expanding on it. We're
Yes.
making policy for the library.
Mhm.
Well, that's a time for a future discussion, and I assume we'll come down to a vote then.
Save some hours.
So on page 75, and we're getting close to the end here. Look at the chart at the bottom for retired employee benefits, and you see it's set up on 5-year increments. And the question is, can it be done annually rather than in 5-year increments? And the answer is, this is the county. We get benefits through the county. This is their chart, and no, we cannot change that.
So the intent of my question was, this is a 5-year step up. It's not a 1-year step up, and you're showing where you are 5 years later.
Yeah, and this is the county's chart, yeah. I think there's only one more. It's the page 76. Very last thing before we get to appendixes, sudden death of an employee. Hope this never happens. Separation will become effective as the date of the death of the employee. All compensation due will be paid to the estate or closest relative upon verification. And the question is, do employees designate beneficiaries as part of the onboarding process? And the answer to that is yes, they do. However, that would not override an estate. Here's who I want this to go to, and the estate is not set up that way. We couldn't disperse to the person they say if an estate then later comes in and says, nope, can't do that. So that's why it reads as it does. But yes, all employees, they provide emergency contacts, they provide beneficiaries for their retirement accounts, but we have to be careful about what they say up front. We do ask that they would change, should anything change, but we would have to look at what would, a final estate might say, or a will could override this.
Michael, a named beneficiary bypasses the estate.
Why don't we say compensation will be paid according to Maryland law? Because estates and these situations can be very complicated, could be contested. So why don't they pay out according to Maryland law?
Well, I
Would that
will make a
be
note of
cover
that right
everything?
now, and we can look at that. I don't think that's going to be a problematic one.
I'm also worried about defining the closest relative. What does that even mean?
Well, that's why if you go by the law, we don't need to
That
interpret it
is
here.
what the law would be saying, but I can look at that as a change. So that's kind of those. Thank you for your patience as we went through those. I just wanted to say, in many cases, there's a reason why the manual was written as it was, but this is not precluding making changes later, just so much as that's what we were saying about those.
So can we just take a moment and look ahead to what it's going to look like when we revisit this conversation in January, right? Because I know we're going to go through another round of edits, another round of conversations are going to happen. When this document comes back in January, none of us, I'm willing to bet, are going to be 100% thinking this is exactly the way I would write this, right? And the key thing is that we are not trying to produce the manual that each one of us individually would produce. We're trying to produce a manual that we think is legally strong enough, that aligns with the values of the library, and that is over the threshold of acceptability for all of us. This is not the platonic ideal of a manual. It is an acceptable manual somewhere in this range, because we could certainly keep going around this table and argue and debate every single point in here until the end of the world. But I do think we need to move forward with this, make the key edits that we think need to be made, and approve this thing very soon, hopefully next month.
So what do you see happening when we have points of discussion in January? Are we going to vote on each and every one of those points?
I think
How do
we
we-
should. My hope is in January that we have one motion to approve this thing as written. If we need to make some amending motions in that process, we could do that. But I think one up or down vote for the manual would be the way to go, especially knowing that this is going to continue to be a work in progress and that edits will continue to be made and that we'll have a voice throughout that. I mean, there are major sections in here that we've approved fairly recently, right? That have been sort of like copied and pasted and added in. So we've been looking at bits and pieces of the policies. It's when we get the whole canvas all at once, all of a sudden we see a million things that might want to be changed.
And if you have further edits you'd like to see, please send them to me. I will consider them, but then, the sort of next draft will be something that I do hope you can do an up or down vote on. Everything won't be there for everybody, but with any luck, it will all be legal. And so far, yes, it is. There's nothing here that's not legal. So, we'll just, with any luck, be able to approve in January.
Michael, how many were on the team to do the update?
I'm sorry?
How many employees were on the team to craft the update?
To come up with this manual?
Yes.
About 6, if I'm remembering properly, but 3 sort of wrote the manual.
Okay.
And then I reviewed it. So it's been as we told you last month, it's been a year in the making.
Okay.
Because you see there's quite a bit here, and they did go out and review law. They did look at many examples from other libraries, and it's been a long process. So I'm thankful for the work that happened with that.
And over and above what the law requires, your group is confident that that this won't be anything in here that would cause a problem in a future in a unforeseen situation.
No, the whole aim of it is to try to make sure if something unforeseen happens that it is covered, but you can't cover everything. No manual can. You'd have, 5,000-page policy manuals. I think this one's getting long enough as is. Would you like to take a break?
Would we like to take a break?
I'm good.
I'm good. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, well, we're going to move over to action items, and the first one is the Everside Health Clinic participation. And you asked us to go out and review staff, and we have the results of that. Belinda, and in some cases, I, with her, went out and talk to all eligible employees. So you'll see on the form Belinda has very kindly provided for us that 42 full-time employees are eligible for benefits and could attend this clinic if they wanted to. And again, it's entirely optional. You never have to darken the door of this place if you don't want to. We have 29 employees currently on Care First, the health policy, and 13 employees are not on Care First. They get health benefits elsewhere. So about 70% of our eligible employees are covered by this. So of those 42, we pulled 39 of them and 3 were absent. We did these sessions in person to explain this. clinic and what its benefits are. And there's a separate page in your packet with the service details, all the things that it provides. Of those 39, 100% would want the library to join the clinic. There was no single negative vote on that. Some people said, I can still use my own doctor. I don't want to do this. And of course, that's absolutely the case. But everybody says this is a good idea for us. And in fact, two employees expressed interest in possibly switching from their policy to ours if this were a benefit. So with that in mind, last time you did vote to move forward should the employees say that they wish to, and I think you've got a pretty resounding sense that the employees wish to. So I would like you to approve us moving forward to join this with the county. Should the county, I believe it's going to be next Tuesday, vote to do it. Now, if the county commissioners come back and say we're not, then obviously the library would not be participating.
What do we have for a handle on the cost to the library?
Well, for the employees, the idea is that their payments for their insurance, that 15% they pick up, would not raise as quickly over time. For the library, there's going to be an administrative cost, which, should we continue to get health benefits, refunds, should be covered by that.
But we don't know what our assessment is for our proportion of the total 7,000. I mean, I guess it's going to be proportional.
It is, and we're like 1%, 1.5%, and it's like $12,000.
They told us $10,000, at least that first year.
Is that a hard number?
I think it's like
Hard number
insurance.
yet.
I think our insurance is never a hard number, is it?
Yeah,
It's
there are no
never,
hard numbers.
So,
yeah.
so I had a kind of a lengthy conversation with Dave Yingling yesterday. It was really helpful because I wasn't quite understanding how this mechanics of this was going to work. So the school board initiated this for their employees and kind of as a recruitment tool, feeling they're constantly trying to hire teachers, and this was a good recruitment tool, how you can walk into one of our clinics. However, you know, I was asking about choices. I still feel people should have a choice. The school board is going to choose to present this as a single item on their deductions and open season. It is two different plans. It's Care First and Everside. They're choosing to present it as one plan and one fee. I immediately said, I find that to be a little disingenuous. Mr. Yingling agreed. He said the county will not do that. The county will show two plans, Care First and Everside, but they're bundled. What's that insurance commercial? Bundle it. You know, so two costs, two line items, and in their paycheck, it's going to show that way, but they do have to buy both. So I'm a little more comfortable with that idea. And they're also not going to start till July 1st. Open season's in May, I think. And so the employees will see it, they'll see the cost, and they can choose to buy it or not, but they will have to buy both, but they'll see the cost of both. And he said, well, you guys the library can do it whichever way you want. But I'm not sure that would work out that way, because during open season, do our employees go to the county's website to see what they're choosing, or?
They go through me, but I get all of the information from the county. The county calculates for us the fees and everything. I'm using the county's database to input my employees into the health system. If we did something different from the county, it would be a significant administrative process for me alone.
Right. That's what I thought. I just want to check with you. So however the county presents it is going to be how we have to present it, I believe.
Yes.
But additionally, and I think a lot of things can change in the next 6 months. They're thinking about paying the full 100% the first year, not the 85-15 employer-employee split. But they're kind of excited about it. They want their employees to do it, and they don't want them to have to pay the extra, $4 to $8 a month. They think in the long run, this is going to put money back in their pocket. And so they're seriously considering doing the 100%. So would that puts it in the position of, we also have to pay the 100% as employer and not the 85? And then do we have to follow that every year? So then they're thinking, well, after the first year,
Are you asking that as a question, or is that
well,
true?
I'm saying that puts us in the position of having to follow whatever the county does, and they may pay 100% every year, not 85. So again, I think we just to realize that a little bit of this is out of our hands. If we have to follow the way the county is presenting this and buying this service, which I think we do, that part is kind of taken out of our hands. Not that it's not good or bad. It just gives us a little less control over it.
Yeah.
And we're kind of at the subject of their decision-making process. So
Well,
that's where they are right
Can-
now. I
can
still
I
think a
also-
lot of things could change, and the commissioners may say, no, we don't want you to do this. We're not going to fund it, or
I-
do your 85%. But this is what they're looking at right now.
I do agree, we're going to be at the county's discretion, but we already are. We go through the county for our health benefits,
Right.
and we don't get to choose what the county is choosing. We
and
get
So-
what they get.
what I would add to that is if the county decides to pay 100%, not just of the Everside, but of the full health benefits, then we would ask that they give the library funding for that purpose.
No, I think you meant only Everside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
oh, only
only-
Everside.
only
Okay, yeah.
Everside.
Oh, only Everside. Okay,
Do
yeah.
we actually have the option of opting out of Everside? Can we even opt out?
We don't have to
saying-
join Everside.
So we could opt out
Right now.
completely.
This is your
Right.
choice. You can opt out right
Yeah,
now.
but
Or-
there is a problem if we
and
do
we
opt
do it
out.
The way they do it.
But
So-
if we go along with the county, though, the contract is only what, 3 or 4 years?
It's 3 years, yeah.
Years.
3 years.
And then I
So
also
this is not
asked,
for time immemorial.
it's not. And I also asked about cost increases, and he said they're limited to 4% a year. 4% the first year, additional 4%, 4%. So you could see a 12% plus growth over 3 years, which,
Mhm.
is not terrible for healthcare. So that's what they're thinking. So it could be a little more than the 10,000 if you add another 15% to that.
Yes, it could.
So again, I think there's a lot of moving parts here that we're not going to know for a while.
Judith, can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
Go back to where you were talking about how the county is going to present it.
Yeah.
They will break it out
Yeah.
on 2 lines.
Right.
Will the county employees have the ability not to take the
No.
So
That's what I
it-
said. They're bundling it, and it's a bundle, for lack of a better word. If you buy Care First, you're buying Everside, but they're going to show the cost of each and show them that you're buying 2 policies.
Well, then that
So-
gets back to Michael's statement
Yeah.
about you can opt out. Apparently you can't.
No.
The library could
Right.
opt out. We don't have
the
to
whole
join. Yeah, the
organization
whole
can opt
library
out.
could opt out.
But not the
There
employees.
is a problem if you do, in that if this turns out to be something very good, we wouldn't necessarily be allowed to opt in the future.
No, and we would have no buying power.
Yeah.
If
So-
we came back to the table
That's-
later.
And Judith, thank you for getting that intel and the context. That's really helpful. I think let's put a motion on the table. I think we can entertain a motion to move forward with the county Everside initiative if the county approves it. I am happy to make that motion.
I'm so moved.
John is the second. Any other discussion?
I want to hear some hard numbers about what it's going to cost. I'm not going to buy a pig in a poke.
Well, we talked about that last month.
Well, I would absolutely put a line item in our budget for 24. for
It's in there.
Everside. I mean, if we're
It's in
we're
there.
going to buy this, then we're going to ask for more money for it.
And how
It's
much
in
is it?
there.
We
can you point
are
us-
asking for more,
can
and
you
we'll
point us
get
to
to
that
that
line?
as our next discussion item, in fact. So
I'm sorry, I'm not sure where we are on the
there
motion.
was a motion. Do we have
There
a
is.
second?
Yes, we do have a second. John seconded it.
Okay.
I would like to know where in the budget the line.
Who
is.
first, who was the, I will get that. Who was the first motion?
I was.
Mike. Thank you. I apologize.
On the draft proposal,
Under health insurance.
if you look on page I'm
One-
not sure these
Is
are
that-
numbered.
On the last line.
The health clinic admin
Yeah,
fees?
yeah, but
Okay.
yes, mhm, yeah.
10,000.
Got it.
Yeah.
So we're like, it's at 10,000 and then the increase year to year would not exceed 4%.
Yeah. So
Agreed with you,
remember,
Nate.
Okay.
And again, the 10,000 could be 11,500,
yeah,
which we can adjust later.
yeah, but for our budgeting purposes, remember that while we would ask for this to justify our request, when they give us funding, it's going to be, all right, here's what the library gets, and we're not going to tell you how you've got to do it.
Yeah.
So we would have discretion if it came out to be a bit more to say, okay, of this, we'll call it $520,000 because that's what we got this year. Here's what we're going to allocate for that. So it's not that the county is going to say, it's specifically for this. We would have discretion with whatever they gave us.
No, but I think this helps in the presentation of the county for why our
Exactly.
costs
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
increasing.
Exactly. We
'Cause
we
you're
we
used to
do.
putting it on us.
Yeah.
Okay,
We want
so
to ask for
you're gonna
this.
pay the
Yeah.
bill.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Any more discussion before we vote on the motion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion to move forward with Everside, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained?
Abstain.
John abstains. The motion passes. Thank you.
All right. Well, on to our draft budget. And if you look at the last 3 pages of that, you'll see what the proposed increases or changes are. The largest item is for personnel, 549,000. That's a 5% COLA and 2 steps for employees, plus some full-time equivalents. 1 for each branch. And is 2 from the mobile library?
What, we count that as a branch. So,
okay.
One for each branch, including the mobile library and an IT specialist.
An IT specialist, yeah. So that's the largest line item. We are asking for increases for health insurance of 5%. You'll notice that 1 is dropping. That's because of somebody not taking insurance there where it was previously done. So $61,600 increase there. Increases for utilities. To try to keep up with certainly this year. Some increases for insurance, and that's to cover the mobile library. Some increases for memberships. New furniture and equipment. Increases. We really could use a lot more updated furniture. In many cases, we have things that are quite simply falling apart. And library furniture is very expensive. It is built to last a long, long time, but it is then charged for accordingly. Increases in technology of quite a bit of money, and let me explain that one. We have had a audit of our technology systems and looking at what we've got. And really, I'd say that over the years, we have struggled to keep the network state of the art, and it's not the fault of the employees. It's simply that we haven't had as much money as we would like. This would also include upgrades for this meeting room, for example. My concern presenting it to the county is that, well, that's going to be a one-time cost, but we anticipate high costs ongoing to maintain the network with the proper number of servers. And this would also include, for example, new Wi-Fi devices. We're struggling with our current Wi-Fi devices to have them work very well. Need to upgrade those in many cases. So that is going to be, we're anticipating a fair amount of cost increases over the years to try to get back more to a fully reliable network. We have had outages at all branches this year. And again, it's not really the fault of the employees. It's simply that we really need to keep the equipment up to date more than we have. And so the total increase we're asking for is slightly over $1 million. Now, you've probably been hearing that there's issues at the state. For example, they just announced that for transportation, they're slashing this year's budget. And that's of great concern in St. Mary's County. And I know if you looked at the Southern Maryland news that some of our representatives will be meeting with the governor probably up at Mako to talk about the effects on St. Mary's County of that. And what it might mean for, you know, a possible upgrade on the bridge over to Calvert. So we are aware this is going to be a difficult budget year. But we intend, as we did last year, to do a letter writing campaign to justify these increases. And basically, we're going to thank the commissioners for their generosity this year. We're not suggesting that this was not a heroic effort on their part so much as to close the gap from where we would have been if funding for the library had remained at county levels for the last 7, now 8 years. That this is what it would be taking to get us there. And the need not only to take care of personnel, which this year's increase, 90% of it went to personnel and not to administration, but to rank and file employees. To continue getting them up to where they could have been, but also now the library really has over the years been in many cases starved for new furnishings, starved to keep its network up to date, and ask for support for that. You'll also notice that we've done a fairly substantial increase for library digital content. It's increasingly expensive and we want another $60,000 for it. It continues to grow, but at this point, its growth is going to be limited by our ability to provide content on a regular basis. And if we can't get more, then we'll see frustration on that demand. So I think we've got solid reasons for putting forward what we're asking for. And we're asking that you approve this as a request, but I'm certainly happy to listen to feedback on it.
So it's basically a 20% increase. Is that right?
And under the current, budget limitations, the county is talking about, maintenance of effort. It remains to be seen how much we get. We're certainly going to have to be careful in our ask to work well with the county. We don't want to make this oppositional just so much as we were told, bring what you need. And we do think that to run efficiently, this is what we will need.
So on the personal services, the first,
Mhm.
which is salaries, is that an increase in personnel and a pay increase, or
It's both, yes, it's both. That's for current employees, that's a 5% cost of living allowance and 2-step increases. And it is 5 FTEs. And I don't know if we'll get those or not, but it's one for each branch, including the mobile library, and then an IT specialist.
What's the mobile library position?
It's going to be an additional librarian for that. Currently, we have 2. And we're training some people to, work as a substitute there. But what do you do with one of the mobile library staff? And we do want 2 out there in the community at all times, not just 1. If one person wants to be on vacation or one person is sick, we think that 2, and we're very grateful for the county for funding those 2, but we really could use one more.
So.
And that person would float at branches when not on the mobile
And we have
library.
a driver, a dedicated driver.
No, I don't think a dedicated driver.
Who drives it then?
The mobile library staff are trained to drive it.
Is this a CDL issue?
No,
Not for a vehicle that big?
No, it's not. No, that's based on weight. No, we don't have to have a commercial driver's license for this.
but
So-
our librarians have, our coordinator, our mobile library coordinator has been working with the county to do a bus driving training with them to make sure that they are also comfortable. They are waiting for the vehicle itself because they want to be trained in their vehicle.
Sure, sure. So the idea is to always have two personnel when the mobile van goes out.
When
of
it's
course,
on
of
the
course.
road, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
just
you-
like in our branches, we never
Sure.
operate with one.
So you have two now.
Two now,
And
yeah.
we
And we'd like a
expect that.
third.
So
And that person, as I say, would probably be a floater when they were not on the mobile library, either working on programming or filling in gaps. And in that case, we might not have such need for substitutes.
We also have the van, so that third person could be out in the van doing story time at a daycare center or, somewhere that the mobile library doesn't necessarily have to be. So that person will be plenty busy.
we have outreach as part of the mobile library, so they are also going in separate directions sometimes in those two places in multiple outreach events. So with 3, they can have 2 on the library and 1 going to outreach.
So what's the split of the extra 550,000 approximately? How much is for pay raise and how much is for new employees?
I'd have to pull up my spreadsheet, which I
Okay,
don't have at the
maybe you
moment.
could just email it.
Looking at the total of 549,000 and knowing what the 5 positions are going to be, you're probably looking at about 55% for pay raises.
I'm sorry, 55.
About 55%. That's a guess. We'll get you exact figures, but if I have some idea of what those are, it's 16.
Can I just kind of looking broadly at this budget? I feel like, ideally we want the budgets we present to offer kind of a win-win opportunity for everybody to feel good and to feel a victory on the commissioner side, on our side. We want to be ambitious with the budget and keep growing and developing the library and making sure we're meeting all the needs. And yet we also don't want to put in a budget that's so high that the commissioners can easily dismiss it as outlandish. What are your thoughts on sort of how we're approaching like the sweet spot in terms of the amount of money we're asking for and what we're likely to get and how we can lay the groundwork for a successful interaction with the county?
Well, I think this year gives us a good template for that. Last year, coming into this year, we asked for 1.7 million, and we justified it with an extensive, and this is before at least Judith and Sharon were on the board, but we justified it with a presentation here and to the county commissioners in February. I'm sure I'll be asked to present to the county commissioners in February again. My aim there is more to focus on what we would like to see as an increase in library services and not the budget specifically. But we go in with the letters and with the community support and with that document that I did share with you that talk about our customer satisfaction levels.
Yes.
And just say, we're a asset to the community, and we have the last 8 years, well, let's say previous 7 years prior to this one, we're underfunded, and we're hoping to redress some of that gap, as in fact several commissioners, when they had our budget hearing last March, promised they would do if funding were available.
But let's turn that coin over. Let's suppose, thanks to turn down at the state level, for example, the highway department budget has ripple effects. Where are you prepared to trim so that we can get what we really want?
There's no place in the current budget for trimming. Everything except for personnel and for the materials, books and digital, everything is budgeted pretty flat. So the only place to trim, if we're going to add somewhere else, is one of those two areas. And that would directly affect public service, and I'm unwilling to do it. If you take away staff, we will not be able to provide as much service. If you take away materials, people will not have as much to read.
I understand all that, but if you don't get what you ask for.
Well, then
some-
we simply won't be able to expand services and we'll continue as we are.
I
All
think
right.
that's like plan B. When we don't get the full million, that is
Yeah,
that's a decision point when we have to come together and decide where to cut it from. So, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, 20% is on one hand, as a former budgeter, a huge increase. However, on the other hand, we're a small piece of the pie
mhm.
to the agency. And it's $1 million. So I'm a little torn here. I certainly don't want to offend the commissioners and their, support for us. And I think we're definitely justified in bringing up the pay raise again. What I'd like to see is, and I think we've been having this discussion all year long, is not just this, but we have to show at the presentation that we're good stewards of the funding. And where have we been able to save money this year? Have we renegotiated contracts? Have we cut any services? Have we found a better price on something? Because it's always good for them to hear is, like I said, we found cheaper paper, we found a better cost of ink, we found a cheaper trash service, whatever it is. When you can go and say, hey, we've been really good stewards because we're looking for cost savings all year long. That gives you a lot of goodwill when they're listening to us. And we always need to have that in our back pocket as we're really, really trying here to, with every penny, we're being really careful that we spend. So
I
that
think
would be like an add-on to the budget presentation as we're finding places to save money.
I think-
I agree. No, go ahead. So part of this whole thing is definitely communications. And so it's about expressing these needs and making sure they understand them. And we did focus on a lot of areas that the commissioners have personally told us are important, things like the meeting room upgrades, so that people can use the meeting rooms more easily and that they have the technology they need. We know how many people are accessing our Wi-Fi, and we know that that's a huge service that we provide to the community. And it's also something. We're also going to be communicating about all of the wonderful things that we did this year that have been impacted by not having constant turnover. So like we had the best summer reading program we have ever had, even before COVID. And I think we can attribute that to having staff that feel comfortable and are staying and are being trained, and we're getting that institutional knowledge back up. And so we do want to show that we are using the funds and that it's directly impacting our services to the community. So that's all part of the communications plan on that. And that's also why we want to do the letter writing campaign. So it's personal and we can show them that the community does care and that we are using the funds to directly impact the community, not just like for ourselves. And we do want to communicate that these needs, almost all of them are again going back to the community. So we're saying, okay, we want meeting room upgrades, we want program funding, we want these things so that we can catch up to where we feel like we really could make an even larger impact on our community.
And that doesn't show in here, but I understand that. That's like the soft, touchy-feely part that you have to.
Right. That's more
That's
the
what Laura will
communication
do.
piece. So that's the letter writing campaign, and that's Michael's presentation to the commissioners, and that's going through the whole budget process. And we definitely are so happy with last year's budget cycle. We do not want this to be adversarial at all, but they did tell us, as Michael said, last year, they said, come back and tell us what you need because we can't give you everything you need this year. And that's fine. And we can say, we did exactly what you recommended we did. We spent it all on staff, but now we would like to focus on some of the other areas that are seeing shortfall. And we're very hopeful.
And remember, we asked for 1.3 last year and got a third of it. So yes, we don't expect to get the million, but we want as much as we can of that.
I mean, I do think we saw a very successful process last year that we can learn from.
And we intend to use pretty much the same process this year. But as I say, I think the presentation of the commissioners, as Laura was just indicating, we've been talking about it already, and it's going to be what the successes are. What are some new programs? What are things we were able to do because of that? Immense increase in outreach, successful summer reading program, increase in digital use. I mean, these are all things that directly affect the users of the library. And that's always going to be, I think, our strongest ask is we're a great community service and emphasizing that.
So I think we're ready to entertain a motion to approve this FY 2025 draft budget? Does anybody want to so move?
So moved as presented.
Thank you, John.
Second.
Thank you, John. Any additional discussion before a vote? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstained? Nope. The motion carries.
Well, thank you for that. And at this point, it's the remaining action item is the election of trustee officers. And I will turn that over to the trustees.
Okay, all right. So we need to elect officers for the next calendar year, president, vice president, treasurer. I've spoken with John and Tressa and the current slate of officers, myself included. I guess we are gluttons for punishment. Happy to go up for re-election. So I think the question is, would anybody else like to throw their name in the ring for any of the positions? And if so, we will do individual votes by position. And if nobody else wants to throw their hat in the ring, then we'll vote for the slate of current officers again. So let me throw it open to see if folks have thoughts or want to.
Question on Dorothy's email. Am I allowed to vote for proxy? Is that allowed? Or do we just say we have a
She
quorum?
gave
We
you
don't?
she gave you your proxy, but you wouldn't have to because we have a quorum.
We don't. I mean, would she be on the record as voting? Anybody know Robert's rules?
No,
That's a good
remember,
question.
it was last year, I gave you a proxy to vote on something. And
Yes.
it was accepted.
Yes.
The issue of
Yeah,
the
it
proxy
counted
was
as a vote.
accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we would count Dorothy's vote. Yes. Short answer to the question. Okay. Seeing nobody rush wildly towards the officer positions, I think we can entertain a motion to re-elect the current slate of officers. If anybody wants to so move.
So moved.
Thank you, Judith.
Second.
Thank you, Tressa. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained?
And Dorothy too.
And Dorothy too. Any opposed or abstained?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, motion carries.
And
You're
at
stuck with us.
this point, it's new trustee business. But before you get to that, I would like to call your attention to our Net Promoter Score, a document I did share with you. If you haven't gone through that and you feel like feeling good, I suggest you take a look at it. I did review this at the staff day. As an explanation, our score is 91.2, and that counts as an A, right? Well, it's even better than that because the top is 100, the bottom is negative 100. So the more negative comments you get, the further down you go. And in fact, your Net Promoter Score could be negative. At 91.2, there are retail establishments that would kill for that. So I think if you look at our customer satisfaction, that you see that people are extremely satisfied with the library for the most part. And those very few comments that indicated some level of dissatisfaction seem to have a political motivation in some ways, and if we're going to maintain a diverse collection, could not satisfy. So I'm very happy with this. In fact, I'm ecstatic with it. And when the occasional sort of bomb gets dropped on me, this is something I look at and say, that's why I'm doing it.
And that is a testament to the amazing work being done at
It is.
every single branch, every day.
If you look at it, it's almost overwhelming. Well, they appreciate the collection, but almost overwhelmingly, everybody mentions the staff, friendly, helpful, going above and beyond. Couldn't be happier with this is a testimony to the great work being done at the library.
Moving on to new business, and I want to revisit, John, the point you raised earlier about the audit. Should we start there? Can you kind of represent your thoughts?
Yeah. So I was not super enthusiastic last meeting about the audit going forward to the state because I felt there were some contradictions in it. There were some errors in it. and some places where the data could have been, I think, presented with a little more clarity. Okay. So what I'm suggesting is that before we wind up going down that same path next year with the auditors, and we've got time, we've got 6 months. I would like to see a small group get together and just dissect the one we just sent forward with an eye to identifying what those concerns are, and if valid, to send a letter under your signature, Mr. Chairman, to the auditors, pointing them out, and if necessary, getting any feedback as to why those things are in there. And if they can't give us that feedback, then we don't want to see those errors again.
So reviewing the audit that we just sent in to really dissect it, identify questions, concerns, and then circle back to the auditors to share this feedback and
Yeah.
address those
Yeah.
issues.
For improvement
for improvement
on the
in
next
future.
cycle. Yep.
Thoughts on that idea?
I'm fine with that. I think it's great to document all those issues, so we have that list when it address it, but when it comes out next year, we know right what to look for.
Yeah.
I think the timing is really important. We talked about this last month, is that we have adequate timing to review this really important document that reflects the library's financial health, which is several weeks. We need several weeks at least to go over it and go back and forth with the auditors, which is normal in an audit chain.
Yeah.
To have that kind of time. So that's going to be present in the contract when we write up deliverable dates next year, that maybe we could look at those and draft or something, and our timing with our meetings and the November 1st deadline, and what's going to be some workable dates. Yeah. And is that November 1st deadline flexible? Which I have a feeling it is. I think if we turned it in November 5th, the state wasn't going to have any heartache over it. I mean, I don't want to miss a deadline on purpose, but we need to get it right.
Well, Judith, flexible and flexible, as you say, that deadline is not fungible, but in the past, it has been the case we have not met the deadline, and nobody gets particularly upset. The county does want it done by November 1st so that they can do their overall report. But we will do our best to get it to you as early as possible to allow you whatever time you can you will need. And if it's if it's less than, say, 3 weeks out, then certainly we will just say we're not going to make the deadline this year.
I mean, it may be that we can give the county a close to final draft. If they're just looking for high numbers, which I imagine they are, then, and we're looking at language and footnote details, those kind of things, we might be able to give them what they need. They can work with it.
Do we need a motion to create this kind of small working group? I don't recall.
I think we can do it ad hoc if
Yeah.
there's a willingness to do it.
You probably should do it ad hoc,
Okay.
and just say this is something that's irregular, and we're just going to look at it informally with just a couple of us, because if you form a subcommittee, it could be argued the subcommittee is doing public business. So
I think
yeah.
if we then kind of establish this ad hoc audit review group, I think it might be helpful to sort of set a goal for when we want to have that review finished, by the February meeting, the March meeting, what have you, just so that we're a little time bound. That might be valuable too, but we can certainly move forward with that and maybe continue the planning over email.
Well, depending on who else is in the group, or if necessary, I'll go it alone, but I know what I'm going to comment on. Somebody else may pick up on something else that I overlooked. It's kind of like the way we've been feeding corrections for the personnel manual. Everybody kind of feeds in and we kind of get it smoothed out.
I would love to be involved somehow. I don't have any expertise, but I'd love to kind of.
No more than 3.
Yeah, no more than 3.
No more than 3.
Okay.
I want to be clear for my colleagues here. I hate numbers. I love investing, but I hate numbers. But in just reading the daggone thing, I say, wait a minute, this number doesn't match that number. And yes, it's got the same descriptor on it. and a few other things. So I'm not coming at it as a certified public accountant. I'm coming at it as John Q. Public and wondering, why is this not consistent throughout?
Any other new business folks want to bring up? Okay.
Oh, I do. John, I think I've asked you for a copy of the Smyrla bylaws.
Yeah,
You're
we'll
still
get-
on track for
yeah,
sending me
I'll
that?
pass that along to Ashley.
And Michael, the PNC statements every month?
Did we print those off? I have a print off for you. We will not make those public documents as we've discussed before. You're welcome to see a print off of them, and Belinda has that for you. And we would like to have that back. Not necessarily right now. You give you a chance to look at it, but if we could get it back.
I would
that
point
be-
out that our other financial documents are in our packet and are part of the public domain.
Yes, but we've been asked not to make bank statements public for reasons we've talked about before. It helps, it increases the likelihood of fraud. You also get every single one of these expenses reported to you each month on the EALs.
Well, we also get the Vanguard, how we're doing, but it's not really indicative of.
Yeah,
the
but it
track
doesn't
record
have
of-
individual, all right, on this day, that exact amount, which can help somebody sort of hack our system. So we don't want to make a bank statement a public record.
Okay. We have reached the end of our agenda. We do not need to meet in closed session for the library director annual review. We will have that at a later date. And so I think we're ready to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, very quickly, there's a Friends of the Library book sale tomorrow at Leonardtown Library. Should you want a bargain on some high quality books, they do pick out nice ones for the holiday season.
What time is that?
9:30 to 3.
Until noon, it's Friends of the Library members only.
Yeah.
I guess we're not. And then noon to 3, it's anybody.
Thank
Yeah, good early Christmas shopping.
You can join the Friends of the Library at the door.
On the spot. Yes, it's it's $15. What a bargain. $15 and you get early pick at the books, not only there, but at the spring book sale, which I believe is going to be in April this upcoming year. I'm meeting with the friends on Monday night and can get you that exact date. The mobile library ribbon cutting January 9th, you'll all get an invite. So those are dates to remember. And our next meeting, January 12th at the Leonardtown Library.
All right. Anybody want to make a motion to wrap things up?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstained? Okay. Have a wonderful holiday season, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, Merry
Ho,
Christmas.
ho, ho.